good day. Welcome to yet another time period review. We are in the process of driving for our 5 this week. We got 6 days, folks, 6 days until our exam. So today I'm just going to get started, jump right in, and we are doing period 2. It's going to be 1607 to 1754. What that's going to cover basically is the colonization of America by the English. 1607 marks the beginning with the arrival of not even settlers, colonists in Jamestown, and 1754 marks the beginning of the French-Indian War. So that's the time period we're talking about today, and we are just going to jump right in on this morning. So here we go. Basically, when we talk about the colonization of the Americas by the English, you got to start with Jamestown. Jamestown, founded in 1607, it starts in the Chesapeake region. What you need to know about is the fact that it was a proprietary colony founded by the Virginia Company, and 104 men come over, and what they faced that first year is what's known as the starving time. And the starving time is just like it sounds. They were hungry. They didn't have enough food. They didn't come prepared to work. They just thought they were going to find gold on the ground and then be able to go back rich fat cats to England. Instead, they just get skinny and even more hungry. During that starving time, we see over half of the colonists lose their lives. This is when John Smith is going to step in, and John Smith is going to build a somewhat friendly trading relationship with the Native Americans. But we'll find that over time, just like any other time with the colonists and the Native Americans, what starts off as a great friendship usually ends up in the natives getting the raw end of the deal. One thing that's going to save the colonies is going to be a new crop, and that's going to be tobacco, which is going to be brought in by John Rolfe. Now, John Rolfe is the English colonist who is actually going to marry Pocahontas, not John Smith. It was John Rolfe. And when he does that, he again rebuilds the ties between the Powhatan Indians, which is the tribe that Pocahontas came from, and the settlers. But once again, we're going to see that's going to disappear over time. Pocahontas is actually going to go back with John Rolfe to England, where she will die from disease. And meanwhile, back here in the colonies, you're going to have the Virginia colonists starting to push into Native American lands. That's going to lead to the Powhatan Wars starting during this time. When we talk about the Virginia colonies, specifically the Chesapeake region, which encompasses Virginia and Maryland, you've got to talk about the labor systems that are going to be introduced during this time. Of course, we started with the indentured servant program. We started with the headright system. And for the first 10 or 11 years of the colony, that's what was used as the primary labor source. But that's all going to change in 1619 when the first Africans are brought in as slaves. Now, interestingly, those Africans were brought in as indentured servants. But after a short period of time, it was realized that, quite honestly, economically, why should we continue to invest in indentured servants and give them their freedom when we have this resource that can be used for a permanent labor force? So that's a big thing during this time. Another big thing during this time, we're going to start to see new government come up. I don't have a picture representing that, but you're going to have the Virginia House of Burgesses, which is going to be the first form of self-government here in the colonies. And that's going to lead to some problems down the road with Bacon's Rebellion and such. Further north in the New England colonies, that's where you're going to see the Pilgrims and the Puritans come in. Now, the Pilgrims are the first to come. They're the ones that are going to come over on the Mayflower 1620. Their form of government is going to be the Mayflower Compact. Mayflower Compact, you're going to need to know that. The Pilgrims were led by William Bradford, and he is going to basically start the colony in the Plymouth region. 10 years later, 1630, John Winthrop is going to lead the Puritans into the Massachusetts region, and they're going to start the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, these are two separate colonies, so you don't want to confuse those. I think I've said it before, when the Pilgrims came over on the Mayflower, all Pilgrims, or how did I put it? All Puritans were Pilgrims, but not all Pilgrims were pure Puritans. That's going to be different with the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Massachusetts Bay Colony is created around the Puritans, and they're going to create that colony using the Puritan work ethic, and you need to be aware of that. Things are not hunky-dory when we get into the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They're going to have a lot of problems with the Native Americans. You're going to see the rise of the Pequot War, the massacre at the Mystic Village. Be aware of those things. Also know about King Philip. Also, Metacom is his name. His English name was King Philip, and he's going to rise up against the Puritans in King Philip's War in 1675. One thing I didn't mention, let me go back here a slide, about the Puritans and their leader, John Winthrop. They, excuse me, they are there to, the most famous thing you need to know about John Winthrop is his presentation of his City on a Hill speech. They believe that they're living out God's desire for them here in the New World, and anyone who might disagree with them or dissent with some of the things that they teach are considered to be enemies of the Puritans, and they will often be banished. That's going to lead us to talking about Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson. So be aware of the circumstances around those folks and why they were banished, and then also what they went on to do. This time period in New England is basically going to end with the Salem witch trials. That's going to mark the end of the colonization period of the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the New England region. The other region you need to be aware of is the Middle Colonies. Now, the Middle Colonies were founded by William Penn in Pennsylvania, and they're primarily founded by the Dutch and the Quakers. The Dutch had been here before. We talked about that in my Period 1 review. The Dutch actually settled in New Amsterdam, which is current day New York. And so they're going to stay in that area, and then you're going to have the Quakers who are going to go into the Pennsylvania area. And the Quakers are going to be a much more welcoming, a tolerant religious society. You're going to see freedom of religion being introduced in the Middle Colonies during this time period. There's a lot more going on, but those are the big ideas that you should look at when you're looking at the colonization leading up to 1700. When we go past 1700, we're going to get into the 1700 to the 1750s. Couple big things happen during this time. The biggest influence that you need to know about during this time is the First Great Awakening. Now, this is going to be led by Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. And Jonathan Edwards is going to be basically in the Massachusetts area, and George Whitefield is going to be a traveling pastor during this time. Now, the influence of the Great Awakening cannot be overlooked. Now, these guys are going to bring in emotion into the church. They're going to basically change the viewpoint, if you will, of the Calvinists, because the Calvinists had taught that your destiny is set, whereas the leaders of the First Great Awakening are saying that you're in charge of your own salvation. You're in charge of your own destiny. And so this is going to cause a completely different viewpoint of the colonists during this time. Instead of, the Puritan work ethic and the Calvinistic approach, what they're going to realize is they have a say in their own lives, especially in their relationships with God. And what this is going to lead them to do, guys, is challenge the authority, not only of the church, but now they're going to start challenging the authority of government. And if you tie that together, because what's going on at the same time is the Enlightenment period, when we're talking of John Locke and Montesquieu and all the other Enlightenment thinkers, and they're going to put that together with this challenge of authority that's being brought forth from the First Great Awakening. And this is really what's going to lead to the American Revolution. So it's easy to overlook the First Great Awakening and the effect it's going to have on the revolutionary time period, but don't do that. Make sure you're aware of that influence. Make sure you're aware of the Enlightenment period and what John Locke used to say, and his idea of natural law and our natural rights, the rights of life, liberty, and property, because that ties directly to the revolutionary ideas that are going to come out in the 1760s and the 1770s. Moving on, also during this time period, what's going to close out this time period is the French and Indian War. Now, when we get to about 1750, a young man by the name of George Washington is going to come into our scope of history. And George Washington was a officer with the English military, and he came over and was working with the English military to deal with the French in the territory west of the Appalachian Mountains. You still have this, I guess, jockeying for territory and land in North America. By this point, all of our colonies are created. We have 13 colonies, with Georgia being our last colony in this time period. But when we get to the French Revolution, or not the French Revolution, the French and Indian War, we have a young man by George Washington who's going to go out. He's actually going to start this war, and he is going to help build Fort Necessity. And in his run-in with the French attaché that's traveling through the Ohio River Valley, he and his Native American allies are going to attack that messenger along with French troops, and that's kind of what's going to spur the French-Indian War. Meanwhile, the colonists are kind of starting to come together. This is when Benjamin Franklin comes up with his Albany Plan of Union. And the Albany Plan of Union, though it's not passed, is going to plant the seeds of unification of the colonies. This is when the Albany Plan of Union, the whole purpose of that was to have the colonies come together, start putting their tax dollars together, and yes, they were taxing at that point. They were colonial taxes, and Franklin said, let's bring our taxes together, let's bring our colonies together, combine our resources so we can help England defend ourselves against the French and their movements around the Ohio River Valley, and also protect ourselves against the Native Americans. Now, this is not going to pass, but like I said, it's going to plant a seed. So basically, again, a very quick overview of period 2. We're talking about the colonial creation of the English here in the North America. We have 13 colonies. Make sure you know the difference between the regions. You're going to have the New England region that was founded primarily for religious regions, whether it was religious freedom being sought by the Puritans and the Pilgrims, or religious tolerance as set up that was set up by William Penn in Pennsylvania. The southern colonies were primarily proprietary colonies. Started with Jamestown as a joint stock company, but they're going to be set up as basically to make money for England. And then the middle colonies, that's going to include Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey. We call those the breadbasket colonies. They were set up for a combination of proprietary and religious reasons. Know those regions. The one thing I want to point out is the Chesapeake region. A lot of times on the exam, they refer to Virginia and Maryland as the Chesapeake region. Make sure you just know the slight differences between the Chesapeake and the southern colonies, and I think you'll do fine with that. That's pretty much it for this time period. What's going to be coming up next, we're going to be talking about time period 3, which is going to cover 1754 to the 1800. Basically, going from being the colonies of England to being the United States of America. I hope this helps, guys. Coming up later, I'm going to do time period number 3. Study hard, pace yourselves, don't overdo it, and we will see you soon. Bye now.